أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله أوله بلا أول كان قبل وآخره بلا آخر يكون بعده الذي قصرت عن رؤيته أبصار الناظرين وعجزت عن نعته أوهام الواصفين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا حبيبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد الله وعليه الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين ولعنة الدائم على أعدائهم وغاصبي حقوقهم ومنكري فضائلهم ومناقبهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين أما بعد السلام عليكم أيضا جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all your fasting, your recitation of the Quran, your supplication, your du'as at suhoor, at sahiri time, du'a sahar, which is a very important du'a to be recited at the time of sahar, known as the du'a baha, Allahumma inni as'aluka bi bahaika, which have all the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in it. The du'as Abu Hamza Somali, which is highly recommended to be recited in the month of Ramadan. I know it's a long dua. I personally myself divide into 4. Every night if you divide the dua into 4 parts and you can recite in parts, not a problem. At the time of Sahar, as a dua Abu Hamza Somali is a very important dua. Reflecting upon the translation of the dua, the meaning of the dua is really fascinating, And it is through these du'as that we will be able to comprehend and understand the tawheed of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is the month of Allah. And in this month we have to increase our ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He has invited us, right? We are His guest. When you go to a guest, when you become a guest, go to someone's house, you would know the owner. You would know how the owner is. So the same way as we are the guest of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this month, we have to increase our understanding and ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why He has recommended these du'as, placed these du'as through our Ma'asumeen alayhi salam. Dua Joshan Kabir. We recite in this month. There's beautiful tawheed. Dua Mujir, we recite in this month. Munajat Shabaniya, Munajat Amirul Mu'mineen, Mawlaya Mawlai, we recite. So as we have to try from our side as much as we can. There should be no time to waste. I know this month already makes us tired as we are fasting, but we have to go a bit of an extra mile in this month. There will be deprivation of sleep, I do understand that. But still at the end of the month we will realize that how much we have gained. Allah will reward us in the best, inshallah, in this dunya and also in the hereafter. May Allah reward you all. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the daraja of our marhumeen and bring them closer to the mercy to Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam in barzakh and hereafter. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The fundamental theme of wilaya and spiritual philosophy, which has already been illuminated in our preceding lectures, we have discussed quite a bit in regards to wilaya. Still, there were a few things which I wanted to share last night, but because of the time we couldn't go over. So what we're going to do tonight is that we will look a bit more about imamology or imamat and wilayat, and then we'll start discussing prophetology in regards to the prophet. Now, as we all know that, wilaya and imama is the extension of that very prophethood, on the temporal plane. That's the extension of that itself. The prophet was the warner and Ali was the guide. But is there a guide today? Asked the sixth imam. To Abu Muhammad. He was one of the disciples of the sixth imam. So he said the Prophet was the warner and Ali was the hadi, was the guide. And there are polemics in the Quran because we have approached these topic or these themes or these phenomena from a spiritual angle, from mystical angle. We haven't got into the dogmatic and the polemics that are there in terms of لِكُلِّ قَوْمٍ had. For example, there is a verse in the Quran which says that every qawm have a hadi, right? This hadi should be there in every qawm, in every period. There should be a hadi, there should be a guide. So there are Quranic and hadith literature which tend to kind of support the school of Imamat, the school of Shia, discipline. But we are not completely looking, we are completely looking from a spiritual angle, from the point of the wilaya. Wilaya is something that is very close. Is there, when a person is closer to the wall, as we explain all of this explanation, that means, wali is the one who is closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Can you or can we find anyone in the course of history who are closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than this 12? In every era you would find, among the Muslims, they have said they are the best and they are the closest one. So where lies the question of, proving imama from that angle? You go to the wali, you go to the one who is the closest, right? And we also pointed out to what type of closeness is this? There are different levels of closeness. Like for example, there's a closeness where I'm close to the wall and the wall is close to me. The wall is completely unaware that it is close to me, but I'm aware that I'm close to the wall. Sometimes it's reciprocal. Both of them are aware that we are close to each other. We may be far in distance, but in terms of our closeness, we are close. So the question lies in regards to the vision of our heart, as we spoke. Allah says, I'm closer to you than your own jugular vein. But we don't feel the closeness, that Allah is so close to us, but we don't, right? It's depend on our ma'rifat and our understanding how close we are. I remember when I first traveled to Qom to studies, when I was here in the Bay, I used to teach in Sunday school, right? And I used to participate in, all of the activities. And actually, I was in charge to take the Moulana around, show him the city, take him to Santa Cruz or Frisco, Golden Gate Bridge, so on and so forth, right? Through Sabah, I used to be in Sabah, a member of the Sabah, through and through. So anyway, so when I moved for my studies, I felt like, what am I doing? There's no active Islam as such. You're not actively doing things, you're running around, volunteering, teaching, taking care of things, because here we are very active. So we feel, comfortable in terms of our, religiosity, But over there, everybody is, Muslims there, there's a haram there, it's something that is common. Here we have to strive and struggle for these things, right? And make ourselves attached to these things so that we stay on the path, in comparison to over there. Over there is the whole end. So I went to Bahjat, and I said that, when we were there, I felt this way. But here I feel like you go in the morning, 7 a.m. for a class, you do Arabic grammar, you do this class, you come back home, take a bit of a break and then go back again, So therefore, you don't really feel that I'm, having that spiritual high. So Abajat, he said, Allah is exactly there where it was for you. It is you who is going forward and backward, who is going far from Him or coming closer to Him. And Allah is closer to you than your own jugular vein, And usually, when our ulama, who are of that spiritual caliber, this is something very common. It's basic advice, right? When they say something, it has a very powerful impact. It kind of like woke me up. I say, oh yeah, it makes sense. And then it kind of changed. So therefore, the closeness, which is the wilaya, right? It is reciprocal. Both of them understand. Sometimes it's one way. The other person doesn't understand because the person doesn't have the ma'rifat of that, right? Or doesn't have life, just like wall. It doesn't have life, doesn't understand that I'm close to it. And sometimes the closeness is so close. Like for example, you have wilaya over your eyes. You have wilaya over your ears. It is you who want to listen. It is who you don't want to listen. You want to see, you don't want to see. Your eyesight you have a wilaya over your eyesight. That's also closeness, right? The rays and the sun. The rays and the sun. The rays are closer to the sun. The rays is nothing without the sun, but at the same time, it has its own entity, it has its own sort of reality to it, and sun has its own entity and reality to it. But both of them have wilaya. Both of them are close to each other, in that close. So therefore, the Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam are like that in regards to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They are nothing but that very manifestation and tajalli which we spoke about of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So now, one more thing. Now, this is what the Imam said, that the Prophet was a warner and Ali was a guide. But is there a guide today? He asked Abu Muhammad. See, the Imams, this school of wilaya, this phenomena, this reality of wilaya, the foundation was laid by the Prophet. Ya ayyuha Rasul balligh ma unzila ilayk. And the teaching of that was very important to the disciples. Yes, there was the zahiri, the exoteric reality of ahkam, halal, haram, all of that was there. But what was of more value was the esoteric reality. To understand what position, on what levels, who are these imams, the impeccable ones, what type of existence they have. That needs to be transferred. That's why we celebrate this. We celebrate the love of Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, because that has been transferred heart to heart, right? The ahkam have been transferred even to our Ahl Sunnah brothers as well. But when it comes to that, esoteric reality of Deen and Islam have been transferred heart to heart to the Ahl Bayt alayhimus salam, and from them to the disciple. So he asked Abu Muhammad, what do you say? Then the disciple answered, yes, I swear to you by my life, in your house there has always been a guide, one succeeding the other, and now you are, and now it's your turn has come. To the sixth Imam, he says, right? Then, Imam says that God have mercy on you, O Abu Muhammad. And he replies this, and he says that, if a verse were revealed for a certain man, and the man then died. These verses, the Quran, where it came to the Prophet. If a verse was revealed to a certain man and the man died, then the verse would die with him, and whole book would by now be dead. The whole book, the Quran. No, the Quran is alive because it's Kalamullah. It is Hayy. If Allah is Hayy, as Allah is eternal, His book is eternal. Right? It just can't be. Right? So His book is Hayy and alive and will continue to exist for those who will live in the future and those who have lived in the past. And this will continue through the Imam. Just as the Rasul was there. And here, that proves, as we are in the month of Ramadan, you have Inna anzalnahu fi laylatil qadr. It is on the night of Qadr. Things are revealed. Tanazzalul malaikatu war ruh. The sixth Imam says that one of the proofs of the existence of the Imam is that this malaika and ruh, they need to come down on this earth. Where do they go? Which heart have the capacity to download that ruh? Because when asked to the sixth Imam, is ruh and Jibreel same? He says, no. Ruh is something else and much greater than Jibreel. And the Quran says, Tanazzalul malaikatu war ruh. The malaika and the angels descend. When they descend, where do they land? Where do they go? With the destiny of humanity, with the destiny of the creation. They land, they go upon the heart of the Hujjah. Right? So the earth here echoes Sadra. Mullah Sadra, one of the 16th philosophers, he says that the earth can never be devoid of an Imam, a guide for every era. Otherwise the Quran would die, owing to the death of those who support it. But the Quran lives and will never die until the day of Qiyamah. The one who guides us towards the Quran lives every moment, and that is the Imam. And that's where the question of Hujjah comes. When they ask that they are the pole of existence, the Imam are the pole of existence. When asked that if there be no Imam on earth, the earth will sink. The earth will eat itself. Right? That is the value of the Imam. the presence of that imam. Now, one last thing in regards to the position of the imam, and then we'll start off the Prophet, is that the imams are the, chapter number 7, there is Surah Araf, chapter number 7 in the Quran, which, we have reached to that, in the daily recitation. Surah Araf is one of very important, all surahs are important, is one of the surahs very important in connection with it has sort of like a Genesis type of, biblical type of, method to it. Because it begins with Adam, it goes on, it discusses all of the Prophet, one after the other, right? And then it ends up with the Qiyamah. So it has a nice story, it has a nice theme to it. If one wants to kind of understand the existence, the chapter 7 of Surah Quran is good to reflect upon, right? Now, Araf is named after a term which is in Surah, which is known as the elevated places, which is known as Araf, is the elevated place. The names of the chapters, there's a discussion in the Ulum al-Quran, in the sciences of the Quran, who named the chapters? Was it the Prophet who named the chapters? Or was it the chapters' name were given later on? The same question in regards to the compilation of the Quran. Was it the Prophet who compiled the Quran before his demise? Or was it compiled during the time of the Khulafa? There are discussions among the scholars in regards to the compilation of the Quran. Some are of the school that no, it was compiled by the Prophet because it was a very important task, such as Khui and many other, Suyuti and many other scholars, they say, are of the opinion that it was Prophet who compiled. But some are of the opinion that no, it was compiled during the period of the Khulafa. During the period of the first Khalifa, it was compiled, right? And that's why the codex that we have is known as the Usmani Codex. It was known as the Usmani Codex. As you open the page, it will say in the very beginning, because this take place during the times of the Khulafa. These discussions are there. So same applies to in regards to the chapter's name. Who decided? One chapter to finish on. Because sometimes you have certain verses which are revealed in Makkah are placed in some of the Medinan verses as well. And there are narrations which points out that it was Prophet who asked to place verses where and where. There was a reason for Prophet asking to place these verses. Regardless, that has its own discussion, in itself, which probably in Q&A when we have on the weekend, probably we can discuss that. Now, Araf is known as elevated places, right? Now here's a narration, which is I'll just do that narration, and then we'll move further to the discussions of the Prophet. It is we, the Imams, who are on the Araf. These elevated places, they will be standing there, and the Quran says they will be standing, and from there will be division of those who will be going to hell and of those who will be going to heaven, right? So it is we who are on Araf, who recognize our companions by their face. And we are ourselves Araf. For God can be the object of knowledge only to those who pass through our knowledge. And we are the Araf for the day of resurrection. We are those whom God recognizes as being the way, the Sirat. Amirul Mu'minin also mentions that, I'm the Sirat. Ihdina Sirat al-Mustaqim, to be on that path, I'm the Sirat. Ali says, I'm the Sirat. So following Ali, it means that we are on the Sirat, right? No one enters paradise save those who recognize us and those whom we ourselves recognize, because they are the Araf. That's why Ali is the Qasimun Nar wal Jannah. Ali is the one who will divide between hell and heaven, who go to hell and who go to heaven. It is Ali, right? Right. No one enters the fire save those who deny us, whom we ourselves deny. If God Most High had wished, He would have made Himself known to men. But He made us His thresholds, His way, His path, the face. We spoke about, Wajhullah, the face, towards which it is necessary to be oriented. Therefore, one who strays from our wilaya or goes others' preferences over us strays from the way. The Imams are that. The Araf, chapter 7 in Surah Quran. You can look at the tafsir, Mir Ahmad Ali Poya. It's a good tafsir to sometimes to look at. Will have more of a, Shia Hadith literature within it that he has used. Now, obviously, there are much deeper discussion, which the time will not really allow us to get into this Araf, the knowledge of Allah, is through the Imam, and the knowledge of Allah is through the Imam for the creation. In one of the narrations says that the knowledge that Allah have in regards to us is through the Imams, that what Allah knows, and what we know about Allah is through the Imam, which we spoke about, the Ma'rifat of Allah. Imam of the time is the Ma'rifat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the other way as well. It makes that a complete circle, the ascent and the descent. The knowledge of human beings to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is through the Imams. Why? Because it is Imam who is doing Qasimun Nari wal Jannah. He is accepting that. That Shafa'at, the phenomena of Shafa'at, that's what it is. The Ahl Bayt will give the Shafa'at, will intercede, as an intercessor. And Allah have given that. Man dal ladhi yashfa'u indahu illa bi'idhnihi. And Allah have given that Shafa'at to whosoever Allah, decides to give that. Ilm ghaib, Shafa'at, position, maqam, is Allah who is the one who is appointing that. So now, basically the knowledge of Allah, the source of that treasure of knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's why we recite in Ziyarat Jami' Kabira as Khuzanul Ilm. They are the treasure of knowledge. Treasure means that it's something that is perpetual, that is always, engulfing, always giving. It never ends, it's perpetual. Right? And that's why, as they are the Khuzan Ilm, even the angels go in order to gain their knowledge of Tawheed to Ahl Bayt alayhi salam. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Another salawat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, we have to touch our discussion in regards to prophetology, which is Nabuwa, which is very important. These 14 nights, I have purposely chosen the discussions on Usul ad-Din. It's very important that we reflect on these phenomena, on these principles from a, mystical standpoint. Because see, every era requires its logic and its reasoning. Every time period. We are living in such a time and bombarded with so many questions and doubts from outside, which attack our spirituality, which attack our aqidah and our belief system. It requires an answer for our youth, for us, so that we carry on our belief, our faith, right? So that's why I have focused on this, and with a different approach in this regard. And you may see this, and it is very natural as well. I don't remember, to be honest, my father asking me to recite Ziyarat Ashura or Dua Ahad, right? Not that they haven't done their responsibility, fulfilled their jobs, of teaching us about Islam. That's why we are here, right? It is because of their tarbiyah, that little tarbiyah that we may have grasped even. When we compare ourselves to them, their iman and their belief is something else. May Allah bless all of our marhumeen and increase their darajah. You know what I mean, right? Because the time that they were living in was very different to the time that we are living in, right? The time that we are living in requires that our kids know what Ziyarat Ashura is, that they should kind of engage and recite that, so that they have that spiritual power to fight the tufan that is outside. The tufan of Nu is not that tufan of Nu. Right now it's tufan of Nu. At this very moment there's tufan of Nu outside, right? So it's very much required of them, that they enhance themselves with these pronouncement and these recitation. Maybe they may not be able to understand, but the magic that it does is to their iman, is to their belief. It is very much required. So the same way, certain things that we may have discussed may be a bit kind of, we have to kind of contemplate, ponder upon, reflect upon a bit, but it's something that is very much required, in this era, that we enhance ourselves with this spirituality, with this understanding, with this perspective, so that we have our belief, our iman as strong. Salat ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, in regards to the Prophet, the Prophet, the prophetic substance, his existence, his substance with a capital S, is the source of Islamic spirituality. All of the manaviyat that we see today and that we have, the source is Rasulullah. The Quran wouldn't be here if it wasn't for Rasulullah. He is the one who had that heart and that care of humanity, that was able to download, that was able to connect, that was able to tap into the metaphysical realms and realities and bring the Quran for us. It is because of him. If that's why Allah says, Alam nashrah laka sadrak wa wadana anka wizraka alladhi anqada dahrak wa rafa'na laka dhikrak. Right? It was the heart of the Prophet. That's why the Quran says that لو أنزلنا هذا القرآن على جبل. If this Quran was revealed upon the Jabal, upon the mountain would have been shattered into pieces. But it was the heart of the Prophet which was capable to download that Quran, to have that Quran, and to deliver us as well. So the substance of the Prophet, is the source of all spirituality. It is the Prophet, who was, on a level where that tajalli, that theophany, of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala strikes upon his heart, started the stream of knowledge, which is the Quran. That lightning strikes on a rock and the rock provides, water. So same way as the heart of the Prophet was where that tajalli of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's why on the dua that we recite on the 27th of Rajab, these du'as on the particular days which the Imams have asked have a very powerful meaning in it. We should make ourselves familiar with these du'as. Allahumma inni as'aluka bit-tajalli al-azam fi laylati hadhihi. In 27th, which is the Iqra started, right? Oh Allah, for the sake of that tajalli azam, that theophany, that manifestation, that reflection, which is azam, on this particular night where the Iqra started. They say that twice the Quran would be revealed upon the heart of the Prophet. One, on the night of Qadr as in whole, the whole Quran was revealed. And then, during the stages, this Quran was revealed, upon the heart of the Prophet, to the Prophet. So Prophet is that substance, is that spiritual substance. And that is why the levels of Tawheed is based upon the stations designated by the Prophet, the maqamat. Stations are known as the maqamat. The whole Sufi teachings, they talk about these maqamat, different maqamat of takamul, of this sayr suluk, of this spiritual wayfaring. They all have maqam. There is hal and there is maqam. When we are spiritually, traveling, when we are purifying ourselves, there's a thing called hal. Hal is like sometimes we get this hal, as a state. We feel like doing dua and crying, and we feel very, in ecstasy, spiritually elevated, right? That's hal. But this hal kind of gradually vanishes away, disappears, right? Now, sometimes, with this continuous hal, we acquire a maqam, which is known as a station, right? Like, for example, 8th Imam Rada alayhi salam says, just for us to understand, right? He says that Hussein, the name, as soon as you take that name Hussein, tears should flow from the eyes. Just like how when you listen to the ayah sajdah, the ayah which we recite sajdah is wajib, we fall in sajdah. The same way when you listen to Hussein, that's how the Ahl Bayt were. Because they have achieved that maqam. We get the hal of Hussein, right? But that maqam is that as soon as that name is taken, something happens, right? So we have to acquire these stations and maqamat. So same way, in terms of ru'ya sadiqa, which means true dreams. We have dreams. Sometimes it's true, sometimes it's not. Sometimes we don't even remember dreams, what did we see? Because it's literally impossible that a person sleeps and he doesn't dream, because his souls travel, right? And the Prophet every morning would ask his companion, what have you learned last night? When he would give them salams, and he would say, what have you learned last night? Because we sleep in order to learn. Because sleeping is a mode of learning. When this body shuts down, the soul is awake and it acquires and it learns. In the world of dreams, it's been taught. The person is taught. He learns, he educates. So Prophet would ask early morning, what did you learn last night? Because wahi, as we said earlier, 6 months was in a form of a dream. Ibrahim, Ismail, all that dream. Yusuf, the whole surah Yusuf, I saw father, 12 stars and 11 stars and the moon and the sun doing sajda to me. What is this? He saw that in a dream. And then the whole surah Yusuf is full of dream. It's fascinating, it's very symbolic, it's a very powerful surah. That's why Allah says Ahsan al-Qasas is the best of Qasas, the best of story, is the story of Yusuf that we find, right? So therefore, the Prophet is, then you get this maqamat of dreams. A person dreams. It's just like that. He will just be, in this very world, but his soul travels and is able to achieve and conquer and understand things. Right? And we have to have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? We have to speak to Him. We have to connect to Him. We have to connect to the Imam. When we go to Karbala, yes, we have the set of amal that we perform and we love and we cry and all that. No, connect to the Imam, speak to him, tell him, when I come, I give salams, you should give me a hug. Tell him that and look at the feeling. What's the difference? Right? We got to do that. And He's there for us. And you all have felt that. When you go there, you feel like He has embraced you. Right? On different level, you have felt that. So we should acquire that maqam and that connection with the Masumeen alayhim salam, with Abul Faz, Salawat ala Muhammad wa alayhi. So Sufism or Irfan or spiritual wayfaring, they mark their journey towards annihilation, towards fana, based upon the Prophet. Based upon the stations of the Prophet. Why? Because it is the only man who is the prototype, who have reached وَقَانَ قَابِ قَوْسَيْنَ وَأَدْنَى as an insan. Two bow length. That's how close he reached. Right? And it was the Prophet. Right? And, so that is why you have the importance of the sunnah of the Prophet being emphasized for us. Every action of the Prophet is considered as ibadat, as a sunnah. Apart from the nawafil that we pray, yes, but the other things which we have to bring into our life in order for our life to become spiritual. Prophet would sit towards the qibla and would eat. Prophet would share the food. First he will give to the person sitting on the right, then he will give to the person who is in the front, then he will give to the person on the left. There's the sunnah of Rasulullah. That's the etiquette of how Prophet used to eat. Having salt before food, for example. And the sunnahs. There's a book which is by Allama Tabatabai known as Sunanun Nabi. This has been translated and it's in English on Islam.org. I will ask my dear brothers and sisters to go take a look. Prophet would brush his teeth 3 times a night. Look at the hygiene. Before going to sleep, after he wakes up, before Salatul Layl, and then before he leaves for Fajr prayer. Right? That's the sunnah of Rasulullah, which Muslims have to adapt, which Muslims have to practice. Right? Prophet would divide his time when he enters house into 4 folds. A time for his family, a time for affairs of the people, a time for himself, and a time for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says that the time which is for himself, he give it to the family. It was very important. Allama Tabatabai says that a little anger with the family may push you 20 years that you cannot imagine. Just a little anger that I may have with my family, with my wife. I may kind of like get annoyed or I say something. That will push me 20 years up and behind in terms of my manavi. That muraqabah, that calculation, that watchfulness should be there. And that watchfulness of my action will come when I start implementing and practicing the sunnah of the Prophet. We all eat. Let's eat the way how Prophet ate. Right? Let's sleep how the Prophet slept. He would name everything. His stick will have a name. His aftaba, the pot he would use to make wudu will have a name. He'll give names to everything. This shows that value. He values everything. He respects everything. His animals, his pets would have a name, right? He was so careful of them. You see, in the Sunanun Nabi, very briefly, right? In Sunanun Nabi, Allama Tabatabai, in the introduction part, he talks about all of our actions goes back to 4 domains, or 4, it can be classified into 4 different, classifications, right? Whatever we are doing, we think that we are free. People, they talk about, I'm free, I can wear whatever I want. I'm sorry, you're not. You're actually following someone. You're not free. You think you're free, but you are actually following something that is out there, it's happening. And you don't know you're following. And you think you're free to wear what you want, right? We follow. So there are 4 classifications. One is we act in accordance to some of the superstitions that have been carried out in the past and handed down to us. Certain things that we are doing are based upon certain of the superstitions in the prehistoric era or in the history. Even we see some of these things, like for example, when the cat crosses or when somebody sneezes, it affects our action. Just sit a bit because I sneezed, for example. We don't do that, but I'm saying, our actions are governed by that. That's one. Number 2 is certain sunnahs or certain practices of ours are prescribed by wise sages, by hakims. Okay, at night, what you should do before sleeping, don't eat any fruit at night. It's soggy, don't eat a banana at night. It's not good for you. So what is this doing? It's affecting our action. When we are talking about freedom, we are doing something which have been prescribed. It's not like freedom in that sense of the word, right? So, you wear this, you wear that, for example, right? This is because of, certain teachings of the wise sages in the past or even today. They say that do this way or do that way, right? So we are affected by it. That's second classification. The third is there are certain universal norms that we all follow, regardless of which creed we belong to. Say thank you, stand up, respect. There are certain teachings that are there and which are universals and which we all follow that, right? And number 4 is those sunnah of the prophets that is there. So which classification we want to be in? Why not the Prophet one, right? The teachings of the Prophet, how Prophet lived, how Prophet slept, how Prophet ate, how Prophet prayed, how he divided the time, right? So we have to be on guard and watchful of our actions. And that's what the month of Ramadan is. It's trying to help us to be watchful of our nafs. And that's the sunnah which we have to implement in our life. And by implementation of this sunnah, naturally we will be inspired and we will try to see things the way Prophet saw. Because we are doing exactly what the Prophet did, in terms of his life, in terms of his dua, so on and so forth. So it's a spiritual purification of ours, because the Prophet have that spiritual substance to him. And he has acted. And that's why the sunnah is universal. There's no male and female. There's a sunnah which is followed by the females as well, regarded as sunnah, because it's about the takamul of the nafs. And nafs is immaterial in terms of, nafs is immaterial and doesn't have that gender as such, right? Is the kamal, the position of kamal is that, So therefore the Prophet was of that substance. And everything And whatever the Prophet did and performed was based upon his higher understanding of the metaphysical principles. And it becomes very difficult when we compare the Prophet to other, spiritual leaders such as Christ or Buddha, for example. Because Prophet was extremely engaged in terms of wars, in terms of marriages, in terms of family fights, so on and so forth. He was a man in that sense of the word, but at the same time, he was the spiritual, he has the spiritual substance, he's a spiritual guide. So it's very difficult to understand that a man who's have reached waqana qab qawsayn aw adna, but at the same time he's engaged with all sorts of worldly things that is there. And one of the things that tonight is we are talking about marriages of the Prophet, and Prophet never got married till Khadija salamullah alayha was there. There's a whole lengthy discussion in regards to marriage, which we'll do it tomorrow, inshallah. But tonight being the night, eve of the wafat of the beloved of the Prophet, where the Prophet said that, he declared the whole year to be the year of sorrow and the year of huzn because of the death of Khadija Kubra salamullah alayha. She was the greatest supporter to the Prophet. She gave away everything what she had, what in the way of Islam, right? It's really a lesson to be learned today, that look at the Muslim state and the Muslim ummah today suffering. And those people who are living in those vicinity where Khadija was there, look at their sort of actions and what they are doing. People are eating grass soup in Gaza. And look how lavishly in many of the Arab countries people are spending, right? So there should be a sense of humanity and understanding, attending to the ummah. And today is the wafat of Khadija Kubra. She gave everything. She had nothing of her own. When she died, she had nothing. And it was so difficult for the Prophet, right? And they say that she was suffered so much. There was sanctions. When she was pregnant, nobody would come and take care of her. She was all by herself and all alone. People would not associate with Khadija Kubra. People would not speak to her. And the Prophet would ask that, nobody came to ask you, to speak to you, to help you. And she would say, well, the baby in my belly, which is Fatima, recites to me and speaks to me, right? That is Khadija. Khadija is someone where yesterday we mentioned that when Prophet went on Miraj, Allah said, give my salams to Khadija. And that is Khadija. That is the position and the maqam of Khadija Kubra salamullah alayha. Right? That my salams to Khadija. And she, her complete surrender to Islam and to the Prophet, and the suffering that she suffered in the Shoaib Abi Talib. And she was the key player for the Shoaib Abi Talib, the sanctions which the Muslims were facing to be broken, because she had connections with the polytheist. And then she made that, pact, and influenced them, and eventually that Shoaib Abi Talib was broken because of her influences to the mushrikeen who were there at that time. But when she died, there was not even a kafan to be given to her. And that's why a special kafan was given to her by the Prophet. And how her children suffered. Siddiqa Kubra, right? The only daughter of Khadija Kubra, right? It was very difficult at this young age that the Fatima and leaving and becoming losing the mother. When Fatima was all alone by herself, she would use the wall to walk as an help. She couldn't walk in that young age. The door was burnt of Fatima. When Prophet died, they came to the house of Bibi with fire. Usually when somebody dies, we take to their house food, but to the house of Bibi, fire was taken. The door was torched. And not only the door was torched, but the door was pushed upon her. The burning doors fell upon her, and she's on the ground. And not only that, Waili, one of the great reciter, they say that he had a dream, and she says that, oh, why you don't recite my Masa'ib? And he says, what is your Masa'ib? I recite, the door was burnt, and so on and so forth. He says, no, that was not my Masa'ib. When they were taking Amirul Mu'mineen out of the house, my little children, Hassan and Hussein, Zainab and Kulthum, they don't know whether they should go help the father or they should help the mother. It wasn't easy for Fatima, Salamullah alayha, Siddiqa Kubra. Allah lanatullah ala qawm al-zalimin, sayalamu alladhina zalamu ayyi munqalibin yanqalibun. بفاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها وسر المستودع فيها بعدد ما أحاط به علمك بمولاتي خديجة الكبرى سلام الله عليها. يا الله 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 يا رحمن يا رحيم يا مقلب القلوب ثبت قلوبنا على دينك يا قاضي الحاجات يا كافي المحمات إنك على كل شيء قدير. رحم الله من قرأ الفاتحة لأرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات, especially for the marhumin of the sponsors of the iftar tonight. Al-Fatiha ma salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الله وملائكته